Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how service engineers at Mars Drinks drive change and become brand ambassadors. My name is Thomas Igu, and I'm the content director at Copperberg, the leading organizer of business platforms for service leaders in Europe, organizing events throughout the year on service management, spare parts, field service, IoT, and pricing excellence. I'm joined today by Jan van Veen, who is the co-founder of More Momentum. And also with us, we're very glad to have Ashley Weller, the UK Customer Service Director for Mars Drinks. A recorded version of this webinar will be sent to participants later in the week and will also be available on Copperberg's YouTube channel. We'd also love to hear from you today. We will have a live Q&A segment with Jan and Ashley to conclude the webinar, but don't hesitate to submit your questions throughout the presentations in your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll try to cover as many questions as possible live. However, if we're unable to answer them, we'll get back to you with an answer by email. For those of you just joining us now, welcome to the Copperberg webinar on how service engineers at Mars Drinks drive change and become brand ambassadors. And now for the first part of the webinar, I'll pass over the presentation to Jan van Veen. Jan, off to you.
Yes, thank you, Thomas, and everybody joining the webinar. So indeed, we're quite happy to have Ashley with us from Mars Drinks. And even more so because as he joined, took the responsibility of service at Mars Drinks in the UK, he had some very interesting challenges he took on board, and one of which was in developing the service engineers into more brand ambassadors. And he took a particularly very interesting approach, which we also recognize as applying the 4 winning habits we have discovered. And that means instead of just focusing on pure the business side of what does it mean to be a brand ambassador and trying to kind of push the change from the top down, he really took the approach of empowering people and his engineers to take ownership of the change themselves. And now after a couple of years, seeing some very good results, but even more important, to see that his team is actually energized to take more steps in driving change and innovation instead of seeing that there is some fatigue going on. So very happy to have Ashley on board to share his story about how he did this transformation and how he used the 4 winning habits. But before we go in having Ashley share his story, let me share a little bit of where we are coming from, where the 4 winning habits came from, and put a little bit of context in to prepare you guys for the upcoming story from Ashley. So I'm from the co-founder of More Momentum, and we are a training and consulting firm, and we work with forward-thinking business leaders in the manufacturing sector who want to accelerate their innovation of their business in topics like digitization, servitization, the changing customer needs, Internet of Things, and what have you. Before raising More Momentum, I was co-founding partner of Noventum Service Management, an international service consultancy firm helping manufacturers to develop their service business and operations. And in, let's say, more than 20 years, I have been helping many companies to accelerate change, and typically saw that too often business leaders and also consultants, by the way, tend to focus on the business case, the strategy, have powerful change management approaches which are typically going top down and pushing and enforcing change. And too often we forget about the missing link, is that to drive change, we really need people to drive the change. So that inspired me to do a research last year to define what are actually sets those companies which are quite successful in driving continuous change for a long time and therefore are the leaders in their industry. What is exactly setting them apart from the many others who tend to stagnate and actually see them falling back behind their competition? So in the many conversations we had with companies, actually we every time see three key problems emerging as a consistent picture. First of all, business leaders or companies see that change is slow. When we talk about big change, or like innovating your business, or small changes like small interventions to fix performance issues, it tends to go slow, and there's always a sign of resistance, energy going into resistance again, resisting the change, and therefore also energy into fighting the resistance or overcoming the resistance. The second key problem we notice quite often is that whenever there is something changing or innovating or improving, it tends to be incrementally improving what you already have. Let it be your products, incrementally improving your products, your services, your sales approach, the operations. There's all small incremental changes and improving the status quo, which will not help you to get to the future and really take bigger changes and accelerate change. And then we see that quite a lot of business leaders or other people in organizations, that they see the change coming up, they see the opportunities and the threats coming up, and that they see that the organization is not responding as quick as they could be and should be, but that they also see that they have lack of influence in changing that in their own organization. So those are the three key problems which ultimately lead to the situation that they see their organization stagnating and falling behind competition. Now, what do we see with those companies who are more successful in that, and then the business leaders who are more successful in driving continuous change and business innovation, is that we see that they have three aspects or perspectives or assumptions and beliefs which are quite different than commonly seen in many companies. First of all, that they really believe that people do drive change instead of resist change, assuming that there's a good reason to drive change and that there are not too many obstacles. And this is quite often the problem, that we tend to create too many obstacles for people to drive change and to change, and that they go into kind of defensive mode. Secondly, we see that they really take the approach that to be able to perform as an organization, we have to develop organizational capabilities, work smarter instead of putting more and more pressure on your people to work harder and faster. It's all about developing capabilities and work smarter. That means quite often when there's a performance issue, that they have the focus of solving the problem from the principle instead of just fixing symptoms. And thirdly, that we see that they really understand and believe that if you want to be successful in the near future and the longer future, you're sure that things will change in your business model, in your operating model and your propositions. So you have to go beyond business as usual now and continuously in small steps or bigger steps, but you have to be focused on changing things beyond business as usual. Another thing we've noticed with those winning companies is that they have four key differentiating habits in their organization and how they manage and lead the teams and their organization. I'll go very roughly through them, and then we will elaborate a bit more during the rest of the webinar and have Ashley telling his story about these, how he applied these habits. First of all, they have a clear direction for the organization. It's very clear what the organization is heading to, for why they're doing it, how they are responding to different trends and changes in their industry, in the market, and in the technology. They have a clear picture of what the future state will be of their organization and the business, that they see how each individual can see how they will fit in, and that they see what kind of initiatives are needed to move towards that future state, and that they also understand why some choices are being made. Secondly, another important winning habit is that they have an ongoing dialogue which is constructive, forward-looking, across all different levels in the organization and between different departments. It's all oriented around driving collaboration as well within different departments. Then the third thing is decision making. It is on a much lower level to empower people to take the decisions. It's that they have the decisions being made there where the action is and where the information is, where possible. So quicker, more accurate decision making, more ownership for the decisions being made and making things happen. And the last one is discovery, that they have people across our entire organizations and different levels who are continuously aware and focused on what's going on in the outside world, what is changing with customers in technology, competition, new entrants, new best practices, and that they are continuously seeing, hey, but how could they benefit from it? Are they ready for these kind of changes? And if not, how should they respond? And the more this is throughout the entire organization, instead of just a process which is going on in a kind of strategy department, the more you will see that people are driving change and responding to change and are supporting the change. So those are, in a nutshell, the 4 winning habits for continuous business innovation and change. And the result of the organizations who have this is that they see that change is really fluid. It's in their DNA. It's actually energizing instead of consuming energy. That they see that throughout the entire organization, people, teams are pursuing opportunities together in collaboration instead of being in a kind of defensive mode and just incrementally improving the status quo. And that they see that as an individual, as a leader or service engineer, you have influence in how your organization is progressing and developing. So I just want to put that in a kind of nutshell towards you. If you want to know more about these 4 winning habits, there's a lot of information to read or to watch on our website. But for now, I think this is good to have an introduction and start having Ashley share his story. So, Ashley, are you there? You're still muted, I think, Ashley. Ashley, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Thank you. Yes, I was battling with Thomas then. So, hi, I'm Ashley Weller. I'm the Customer Service Director for Mars Drinks. I've been with Mars now for 8 years, and during that time have been working predominantly within the service department and service function of Mars Drinks. My teams have now pretty much control all touch points with the customer journey that fall outside of sales and account management. So we deal with kind of all our customer interactions, be it from engineers, call centers, third-party operators, or our logistics teams. And I'm very much looking forward to having this discussion with yourself, Jan.
Very good, Ashley. So just maybe as a starter, can you quickly introduce Mars Drinks as a company, your service department, and let's see, what are the key challenges you saw for Mars Drinks and services in particular, which you were encountering when you started?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mars Drinks is one of the divisions of Mars Inc. So most people will know some of our other products, so the Mars Bar, Snickers, Galaxy, Uncle Ben's Rice and Pedigree are a number of the Mars Inc. products around the world. Mars Drinks is a hot drinks company that specializes in the B2B marketplace, working predominantly in Europe, in Germany, France and the UK, as well as then our North American market. We deal with mainly blue-collar work environments through our Clicks machine, and also our Flavor machine is for our white-collar. We have been part of the market for about 45 years now, and along with the market, we're starting to see some fatigue and some change on the way that the customer experience wanted to be felt. I was brought into the technical team to manage the national technical team to start understanding how we could build more relationships with our customers. So we were very much looking to understand, from a customer service point of view and from a technical point of view, the teams were being controlled by demand. So a customer would phone in and call for a service, and the guys would be sort of waiting for these calls to come in and would then dash off as quickly as possible to service that customer. And I wanted to really move that from a break-fix culture to more of a sort of a preventative culture, where we were controlling demand. And from the business, we were looking to increase our customer engagement, increase the overall performance of the team, and extract more business benefit. So we knew we had this this vehicle of customer engineers that were very much appreciated by the customers, and we got some lovely feedback about the way that they conduct themselves. But we knew as a business that we could be more from that. And I was given that as a sort of kind of a challenge by the management team. So right, what can we do with this? And that's where we started kind of getting our thought from, is to understand, you know, what can we do with this team of engineers who absolutely love working with their customers, but felt pretty disenfranchised with the company. They were seen as not as important as maybe the sales teams, and their voice wasn't being listened to, and really were starting to kind of fall away from the overall business. I felt more in tune with the customers than they probably did with the business. So that was kind of the state of affairs when I took in. So it was really about kind of bringing those two together, bringing us and the team back together as a company, and also understanding how do we work with our customer base to drive those pillars. So for me, I'm not an engineer by trade. So taking on the task of managing the engineers, I really quickly realised through with my management team that actually that I wasn't going to be in the position to kind of come up with all the ideas. I wasn't the one that was going to be able to drive the most knowledgeable way of fixing machines and challenge the way that we're doing things. But what I could do, and I had a unique position, was to able to drive the communication between the guys in the field and also the business, to allow them to do their job better, quicker, faster, and allow them to kind of move through what problems they had and they were experiencing to drive a better customer experience. And that led us through the journey. Yeah. Jan, are you there? Check, check, check.
I think we're having technical difficulties with Jan. But
okay. Well,
Ashley, maybe you can explain to us what the first steps were that you took.
No, that's fine. Okay, so I can pick that up. So really, so I had 40 engineers out there in the world, and first of all, they all believed that they were doing the best work they could, and they also thought they were doing it the best way possible. But we had widely different reliability data, widely differing ways of working, widely different customer experiences. But you know, through the genesis of the conversations, actually they were all trying to do the same thing. They were all trying to and wanted to please their customer base, but just didn't know quite. They thought they had the best way of doing things. So through conversations with the teams, we realised that there was something here that we could really build on. So I also knew that through conversations with them that actually what they were feeling is that they also were started to know the issues that were around. They didn't need me to tell them where the problems were. What they needed was to be listened to, and also to be able to have a platform to kind of really drive what they really want to do with their customers. So they knew that they had this problem, and I also know that I had a kind of a remit from the business to make some step changes, and whilst some of the steps that we wanted to take were kind of different between the two parties, we both realised that actually we needed to be moving forward and coming together. So we kind of had this opening to kind of drive, but we also knew that we needed everybody on board. And we needed everybody to be part and parcel of the process and contributing to the goals for them for all of us to be successful as we go through this. And the one thing we knew is that, you know, there was going to have to be this paradigm shift for the teams to kind of realise that the business was listening, and also we cared, and also we wanted them to be part of that, but actually that they were allowed to make some of these recommendations. I'm lucky in a way that because working for Mars, we have our 5 principles, and one of the principles is about personal responsibility, and by stressing the requirement of responsibility of our associates, we're able to leverage the DNA of our staff and our associates to really start building sort of the platform we started to work on. So moving through to the kind of the vision and strategy piece that we wanted to kind of exploit, we were looking to, I wanted to bring service back into the fold of the company, and we had a conference which we called Stepping Out of the Shadows, which was at the time a celebration of the first 40 years of business, and really looking back at the important roles that my team had actually played in many of the developments and the insights and the journey that the business had been on over that 40 years, and rekindling that kind of, we can do this, we can be part of this, and actually we've come up with some pretty good ideas over that time. And we used a structure called the 3 S's, which was around kind of looking at how do we strengthen, so how do we build on our service, how do we strengthen our relationship with our customers, and ultimately how do we stimulate then change into that customer base as well. And we really wanted to move the guys from being the white knights, the guys who would pick up a call from a customer and say, my machine's broken, and would dash in as quickly as possible to help the customer solve their coffee issues, to moving that from that to being a brand ambassador, one who felt comfortable and confident to talk about the bigger picture about what Mars Drinks could do for them and their consumers and their staff on those sites. And to enable that, we needed to empower the engineers to be able to see that they could make change into that process, and really that we needed their expertise to help us to achieve that. As I said, we had 40 engineers all believing that they were doing the right thing, but it's about just making sure that we could refine those ideas into one area. So we needed to sustain change as well. So we also realized that I as a manager could quite easily put a bunch of KPIs together, and to stress that if you didn't achieve this, then actually we would have to have a serious talking to, and that there could be outcomes that would sort of impact your life and your journey at Mars. But realize that was only going to get you so far. It would get you commitment. It would get you compliance to what you were trying to do, but it wouldn't give you the commitment that we needed for this to be a long-term success. So really looked at kind of understanding, well, what do we need to do to kind of build that relationship between us and the business and the guys, so we could gain that commitment, use their expertise, use their knowledge in a way that it started out as a safe environment and fostered that culture of creativity. And one of the things that which we'll stress upon later, which is about how we then created our continuous improvement culture and how we leveraged that, and how that's changed over time. Because whilst we had this idea about the continuous culture, over the last 4 or 5 years that we've been doing this, it has changed and been very iterative and keeps refining as we keep getting better as we drive that culture coming through. So we're not afraid to get it wrong. We're not afraid to kind of have things going at 80% right, and we're not afraid to make changes on the basis of feedback that we get from the guys in the field to say, actually, it's not quite working. What about this? What about that? And just by having a structure that's fluid and is open to change, just allows then the demonstration that actually everything is open to change. So before I go on again, just like to see if Jan's back on board.
I think I am.
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So sorry for that. Just to be sure, because I was out for a second, did you share about the kickoff conference?
No, so I've not yet moved into the kind of direction piece yet. So so I'm just starting to frame some of those days. So I think you wanted me to touch on kind of three perspectives. That people do drive change, so I'm very clear that to get any of the changes that we've achieved over the last 4 to 5 years would not have been possible without 2 sets of people. That my management team is vitally important on that journey. So they need to be very much brought into the fact that we were open to change. And we've changed people in that team over the last 4 to 5 years, and each one of those people have added value and direction to that process, and others have gone on to other things. But taken those learnings with them as well. And I think that actually once you start being part of this process, that actually you realize that by empowering the teams, that actually it's a great experience. It's kind of scary sometimes because it can go all over the place, and as a leader you need to be okay with the fact that actually you're not leading that conversation sometimes. You may be framing it, but sometimes it may go in directions you're not expecting it to, but that's okay, because from something I heard today, there's a wisdom of groups. There is a wisdom that you will move you in a direction that you are not expecting, but that's not a bad thing. That's an opportunity for you to explore more. And having a strong management team who are open to that and have freedom and lack of fear to allow that to happen is important. And the guys, the teams out there that were willing to kind of move with us. And I think that we centered around a pivotal point. So the reason we knew we were doing it was because of the customer. And if we pivoted back to that discussion at any minute in time saying, is this the right thing for our customer? We knew the conversation was anchored in something. So it wouldn't go too far and it wouldn't move away from that customer piece. So the guys and the teams knew that we could control that. Capabilities drive performance. It's not about pushing people to work harder and faster. It's about making sure that you give them engagement and the skills and the opportunity to realize their full potential. And I've got a number of examples of of guys who may have been written off in the past, who may not have been seen to be the team players, or people who are, keeps coming up with weird and wonderfuls but don't seem to concentrate on the day job, who actually now are driving some incredible conversations and change within the teams just because we've given them that freedom to do. And people who were at the bottom end of the schedule and the spectrum of the capabilities within our team historically, we're now at the top. And that's really exciting to see their journey through this process. So people really, and then as soon as they see that journey, they get more excited. And you know what, as soon as they get more excited, they become more empowered as well, which is fabulous. And I also work on the basis that, in essence, most people come to work to do a good job. There are very few people who are out there to sabotage or to not do what they want to do. So if you give the people the opportunity and the trust and that the people will do a good job, then you will get the trust back from them. And then success requires beyond business as usual. And we've tackled some culture areas, we've tackled some big projects, and we're now looking at the future around kind of driving how do we move into the IoT, and not being afraid of having some of those broader conversations has really allowed people to help us fix today as well as look at tomorrow as well. So I think that they're really the foundations of some of those conversations.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. So it was good to hear, let's say, your perspective on the three winning perspectives. So let's spend the rest of the, let's say, another 25 minutes or 20 minutes on step by step going through the 4 winning habits.
Yeah.
So I just put some ballpark text on the slide here, and so the direction is all making sure that your teams and people in your organization, maybe even outside your department, have a kind of clear picture of what is the mission, preferably a kind of meaningful mission, have some strategic intent on what we try to achieve, which is kind of motivating and arousing, and have very clear picture of the future state. So what is the change, what we try to achieve. So can you share how you have been building that picture with your teams? And also had the feedback that this was an interesting picture for your team and your field service engineers, something for them to go for.
Yeah, of course. So I think initially the direction that we came up with was, I had to first of all align the overall direction of what we were trying to achieve with the other senior leaders within the business. So when we were then having discussions with the sales teams or the finance teams or the R&D teams, that actually they understood what we were trying to achieve. So that alignment is really important at sort of kind of management level, to understand that actually this is the journey we're going on and these are the parameters we are working towards, and actually knowing that we're going to have to come up and have these conversations with you guys and to be open to those conversations was really important. And how we started that about was that we had a conference called Stepping Out of the Shadows, where we did look at the 3 S's, so service, strengthen, and stimulate. And not only did we invite my teams and the guys in the ground, but actually I made sure we had all the managers of all the other departments in there as well. So they were very much part and parcel of the journey, part and parcel of the process and the conversation as well. So they could see those interactions. And I think at that point we then set the expectations. This wasn't going to be us working in a silo, that this was very much going to be us needing to work with all the departments, and actually the relationships between their teams and my teams were just as important. And so it was about saying that we might come to you guys requesting something, and this is why we may come to you, and this is why it's good. So therefore we could prevent the shutters coming down, or at least then become the grease between those conversations to allow them to be more fluid. We also made sure that, you know, through understanding what we wanted to do, we needed to make sure we were really clear in kind of the expectations. So I did a process of what I called connecting the dots. So as a business, we have our OGSM, which is in essence our goals and measures that we want to achieve as a UK business. And from that, there are going to be certain parts of the ambition of what we want to do as a business that will impact and that will need my teams to deliver. And so by linking the business success to the success of my teams, very much felt that they were now part of that delivery, and that's what they wanted to do. And that's important because they felt that they were now able to contribute. But with that contribution then came accountability. So whilst they were asking for that, for the business to remember them and to look after them, the business had said, absolutely, we want to be part of you, and you are an absolutely strong USP. And the more we think about it, you are the USP that we continue to win within the marketplace. So how do we use that? But with that then came this accountability, and that scares people sometimes because it's quite easy to say, don't forget about me. It's very much more difficult for the guys to accept that accountability. But they recognised that it wasn't anything more than what they were doing on their own. We just now need to kind of codify it and make sure the business knew what they were up to. And again, having it as the sort of the accountability meant that we could put it into their IBO, so their individual behaviour objectives, and then we could then create development plans for each of the individuals to say, actually, these are areas that you need to work on, these are the strengths that you have, how can we use those strengths to benefit the business? So let's not work on the things that people don't have. So if they're not good public speakers, then don't tell them to go on a public speaking course. But if they're very good at project management and they're very good at some IT stuff, well then use those skills that they do have to benefit the overall organization. So, and it took us a bit of time to kind of understand, by working on the things that are left in and enhancing that, we could drive greater change and greater enjoyment and greater engagement from the guys, and gave them the power to go do that. And again, as the strong, I needed to make sure that my management team were very much part and parcel of that journey. So they also had a voice, and they were very much challenging me and the business to say, well, this is what you want us to do, this is some of the things we're going to need. We're going to need some IT, we're going to need this, and being really kind of that two-way conversation. But this is, I'm not going to stand up and say I want, without being able to say I will give, and we needed to make sure we could have that conversation all the way through. So when we stood up in our conference, we had this 3-year plan, and we said this is where we want to get to, and these are things we're going to be doing in 3 years' time, and this is kind of where we want to be going through. When I reflect back on our results and say, did we get to where we wanted to be in 3 years' time? I would say we're not 50%, but what we did do is go in a different direction off a different tangent, which brought us greater results than we had thought possible at the starting point. So we're okay with moving off our trajectory as long as we kept checking in to say, are we moving in the right direction? Well, absolutely, because it's changed and we're moving forward.
So, Ashley, one of the things you did at some point notice is that, for example, your field service engineers had a kind of fear that they were expected to sell. So
that's correct.
That would be kind of having a wrong picture probably of the future states, which they did not like. So how did that work out?
So, and I came from a sales role into this role. So their first thoughts were, we've got a sales manager now starting to manage us. We're going to be expected to sell straight off the bat. And it was really about understanding, for me, it's saying, well, I'm not expecting you to sell. And let me be very clear that this is not what I expect you to do. And saying, but actually, what you have already, these great relationships with your customers, you talk about your customers endlessly. You talk about how you help them, what you do. And actually what I'm wanting to do is to standardize what that could look like. We also know from our customers that they value, and we do a lot of work around getting our customers feedback, is to say, well, actually, these are the things that our customers say about you guys, and this is what they say we do really well, but actually what they want more of is they want more communication, they want more acknowledgement, they want more information, and they trust you guys. So if we've got this kind of conversation about saying you can help your customers help themselves by having a slightly different conversation with them, is that going to be a benefit to them? And I think once you connect the dots and told them that actually remove that fear of what they thought we wanted to do, to where we actually what the customers wanted them to do, actually allowed us to have a really strong kind of conversation. 4 years down the road, are we where we? If the guys were to look at where they are today compared to where they thought they were going to be, they would now say we're selling, because we've moved the journey so far that it's now natural to them, and that has come through just kind of over time, and just and that's happened naturally, not through direction, but just the ability that the guys have demonstrated that they can just keep doing, and they've done by themselves.
Yeah. So what comes out quite clear is first of all the importance of being quite clear about what you're heading to, how it's going to look like, what is expected or important and what isn't. And also have a kind of dialogue where it's not a kind of top-down story about this is how it's going to look like. But on one hand, there's an importance, there's a need, there are some concerns, and that you have a kind of process where people are involved in developing that vision or that mission and that direction, so that everybody can own it. So yeah, like that. Then let's have a look at the other one. The other habit is the dialogue, where you're pretty much working on having a forward-looking dialogue about progress, performance, a very constructive review, having forward-looking interventions when things go wrong or different than expected. And probably the key point here is to have and create an environment where it's safe to try things, to fail, to learn, etc. So this has been an important thing for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, as a team, we knew that we needed to create a platform for change, and we leveraged what one of the manufacturing teams had, which was called continuous improvement, and we were looking at kind of how we could understand the drive for, by working on continuous improvement, we can start controlling our demand. So ultimately go away from being a demand-led business to someone who's control of what happens on a day-to-day basis. Because the CSTs were talking about, I drive too much, and there's too much work going on. And I said, look, if I can cut your drive time down and spend more time on your customer sites, which allow you to manage your call base better, would that be of interest to you? And they said, yes, absolutely, but it's a dream state. And we said, well, if we could, would that work for you? And they said, absolutely. So we knew that we needed to kind of get there, but to do that, we needed then the guys then to work with me to help me then understand where the continuous improvement came along. So one of the first things we did was look at our standard operating practices. As I said, we had 40 guys out on the road, all doing the same job, but 40 different ways that they'd got used to. So we got 10 of them in a room and said, right, absolutely, this is you all do it slightly differently. Let's look at those practices together, and we gave them the tools and the time just to say, well, you tell us what the best way of doing this is. And slowly but surely, by going through all our machines and driving what is a quality call, we were able to kind of really leverage their responsibility to create one kind of document. And having that opportunity for them to look forward about kind of what we wanted to achieve and work together allowed it to be a freer kind of conversation. And because at that moment in time we weren't talking about kind of quality, making sure they were doing all the right things and checking them out and saying, they were able to talk freely and say, well, I don't do that, I did do that, and I get through this by doing that. We got some really rich conversations about kind of the black arts that sometimes happen in the field. And that allowed us then to kind of standardize and kind of allowed them to kind of do some ways of clearing the air and being structured in the way that they actually were able to tackle that. And because they could tackle then creating a solid SOP meant that they found that once they applied it to their work, the reliability of their machines started to improve, which then created space in the diary. And as soon as they then had space in the diary, they could do different things. And they thought, well, if I could do this, I could do that. What about doing this on this machine? And they started coming to me and saying, well, you know, how do we, can we do this? And this is where our continuous improvement culture came from. So we very much started saying, well, you know, we want it, and everybody's sort of objectives. Everybody must come up with an idea. Everybody must have an idea because you're all very good and you all must have an idea. And so everybody did come up with an idea, and some of them were dreadful. Some of them were very good, and some of them were in the middle. But because we told them they had to come up with an idea, they did. And it didn't matter how good or bad the idea was, it just came up with an idea. And over time, we've moved that through to say, actually, it's not about the volume of ideas that people are working on. It's about the authenticity and the quality of those ideas. And actually, don't just come up in isolation. Work with your peer groups. So as your regions, your teams, sound out these ideas and work on them together. And from that, you then get this kind of ideas, and these ideas that get built on. And by the time they come to kind of the innovation table, that actually they are very clear thoughts. And some of those are great, and some of them are ones that we will park because we're not in a position to do those. But by having this opportunity for the guys to keep looking forward, it drove that conversation. And what was really clear from when our first conference, when we came together, we held a session called a Goldfish Bowl. And it's literally, I sat in the middle and everybody sat around me, and it was their opportunity to talk to me. And I had to listen. So it was very much at that moment in time, set the tone to say, you know, I'm listening and I will take everything down. And at that point, I think that we were able then to set that dialogue straight to say, you know, it's not me that needs to be, that can drive this change, it's you guys, and I want to help facilitate that. And then through that continuous improvement culture, we started to see that come through. Now, not everybody makes the jump. Not everybody can make that connection. And you know, we have lost people along the way. People have retired thinking actually that, well, this isn't, I've done my time, this isn't where I want to be going, and that's cool. And I fully expect people, not everybody, to come and make the jump through. But those who do, they certainly make a difference.
So, Ashley, can you maybe elaborate a bit on what you did to create this, reduce the fear for failure as very specific challenge? And so this was a situation that this fear was there. So, yeah. What kind of measures did you take to reduce that fear?
Well, it started off quite, no, I wouldn't say accidentally, but it came more from a relaxation. So, you know, there's an old adage that, you know, when an engineer sees a glass that's half full, they don't see either half empty or half full. They see a badly designed glass. And they wanted everything to be perfect 100% of the time. And I said, actually, you know what, that's never going to be the case. So we have to accept that, you know, if something is 80% good, then absolutely, then that is something that is ready to go. We can start working on that, and we can refine the rest of the 20% as we work through. It doesn't need to be perfect. And so therefore, once I started setting the expectations that it didn't need to be perfect and things could be iterative as we move through, there was a level of acceptance that that could be the case. So, you know, when we started to develop some IT in the field, we knew that, you know, the guys struggled working with iPads because it was a cumbersome tool that didn't do what it wanted to do, and it spent most of the time being a really expensive doorstop. What we needed it to do, we needed some IT that they could work with, and they came up with ideas of using iPads and that sort of stuff. We said, well, let's try it. And on that, we could build some apps and some technology that we could help with our customer conversations. And we told them that, you know, this isn't going to be perfect. And then I think as soon as we told them that we weren't going to get it right, it was okay for them not to get it right. But if everybody knew that we were going to be iterative and change and tweak and move and develop, then it was okay to get things wrong and to change. And I think if we should, as a management team, the humility to say, actually, we don't get it right all the time, and I'm not expecting you to as well, that vulnerability that I showed then transferred into the organization as a whole. So, you know, the culture that you get is the culture that you create. And I think as a leader, I have to be able to demonstrate that. So I can't say to somebody, if they try something and they get it wrong, I can't reprimand them for getting stuff wrong, because I've asked them to go do that. I just ask them not to make it really expensive mistakes, or not at least twice. And we recognise that, and that's the the start of it.
And what you also did is have a different approach on performance review of your teams.
Sorry, Jan, can you say that again?
So I think you also changed the way, but on how you reviewed the performance of your team members and your engineers.
Yeah, so in a way that we took some of our measures and said, right, we needed to understand. We were chasing a number and wanted to improve a number, but actually what we realised is that it wasn't customer centric. And actually that the customers, the way that we're measuring it, that we weren't defining that customer experience too well. So we then went to an annual measure, and we realized that was wrong. So we changed it to we're now looking again to move it to a quarterly measure. So, you know, we were very open to talking to the guys and saying, you know, this is what we're trying to achieve. What is the best way of kind of getting to that? And they would say, you know, you're measuring us on this, but actually if you measured us on this aspect, actually, I think you'd get a much clearer view of what you're trying to do for your customers. So, you know, by having that dialogue, and you know, we started off with, I know, like 15 or 16 different measures. We're now down to about 5. And because actually we realised what the key things are, and what do we know need as a team to make sure that actually we're driving the right conversations, and the guys can influence those as we go through.
So, and another thing I know we've been discussing is also to make sure that if people did something and failed or didn't go as well as expected, that would never be held against them.
Absolutely.
Or have a kind of conversation, okay, what did you learn from it and what would you do different, and that would not block them in their performance review, eh?
Yeah, and the performance reviews are concentrated not on the what. It's more about the how. How have you got to what you did? Because if you talk to me about the journey, about how you move from here to there, or A to B, then that's a much richer dialogue. And it demonstrates those people who change, and those people who try, and those people who do things, and those who are successful, and those who try something and then do it slightly differently. It also then really opens the eyes of people who don't know how they do things, or don't understand the result of their actions, or don't try and do anything. And it removes people, it allows people not to hide. As a management team, it was very easy to talk about the success of those who were succeeding through demonstrating how, and we rewarded and recognised in the teams and in the overall organisation those who the importance of how. So we'd have R&R, where each of the teams would go through the successes of other teams in the regions, so that they could see what other people were working on, which then allowed sort of, oh, well, if they're doing that, can we talk about this? And it was like, and that's what created that dialogue.
Okay, thank you. So then let's go to the next winning habit, is about decision making, where the key thing here is that besides having a kind of top-down decision making and strategy, which is quite high level, that you allow and empower people at the lower levels in the organization to take their own decisions on how to achieve things and build their own strategies, and that you provide full transparency on the performance and progress to make sure that they are equipped with the right information to take those decisions. So you have been seeing that even on the level of service engineers, that they were taking initiatives, they saw areas to improve, and that they actually went on doing it. So how did that work, and how did they start doing that and being more on a higher tempo in doing this?
So a lot of it started sort of undercover. So a lot of things, we started having these conversations with people, and you suddenly find that somebody's been doing all this work at home and in the evenings, and they were working on this, tinkering on this idea, and actually that they'd spoke to a couple of other people in the team, and they'd kind of worked on it together, and what we kind of explored and sort of exploded was this kind of subculture of people doing stuff and then and making sure it became more wider news. We had one of our guys who was having dreadful trouble with ordering spares and knowing which part went with each machine, and for him, he just needed to organize it in his head. And so he created himself a spreadsheet, which turned into an app, which turned into this multifunctional thing that he and his team thought were great. And we said, well, you know, when did you do this? And he said, oh, I just enjoy doing it in the evenings. and it just gave me something to do. And we explored that and said, well, actually, if it's good enough for you guys, let's bring it on to everybody. And I think then when people realized that we were celebrating the successes of others, that they then said, well, I've been working on this and I've been working on that. And with some great examples of people coming to me and saying, well, one of my problems I'm experiencing is in my reliability is on CoinMEX and how we do things and how we float the CoinMEX. And I said, well, you know what? Go in and come up with an idea. If you've got an idea, then let me hear it. And by making myself available to those guys to say, I have an idea, and if you want to have an ear, then I'm ready. And all I need you to do, I don't care how professional it looks, I don't need it to be polished. I just want to know what the impact could be on our customer base. And if we focus in on our customer base, that will allow then the conversation to come forward. And I was amazed at the number of individual ideas that people had. I mean, we've had, over the last couple of years, we must have had about 150, 160 ideas come our way to kind of work on. And we've implemented over 30% of them, or currently they're still being implemented. And some of them will save us 30, 40 grand. And so these are implementation things that we can do to change our ways of working, that they've come up, that one, changed the way we do things, but also then ultimately save money to the business, which I think was just a huge testament to the guys seeing opportunity and wanting to improve.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Just having a look at the time, maybe it's good to briefly touch the fourth winning habit, which is about discovery, having, let's say, on all levels and teams, people being more involved and active on exploring the outside world, how that will impact your business, and how to take action on it. So can you briefly elaborate or tell your story about what you saw happening in your organization?
So I think that I've got an example. So I got a young engineer. He's only been with me for 12, 15 months. So he's new into role, and a lot of my guys have 25, 30 years worth of experience, so that they are extremely knowledgeable. This young buck comes in, and he wants to kind of do something different. And for me, it's great that, you know, by having this culture we've changed over the last 5 years with all these guys who've been in the business, it means that we know that we're moving in a direction. But suddenly I've got someone who's new into role, who understands the culture we're trying to do. And he wrote to me after, I think, about 10 or 11 months in the business and said, right, he said, I've been having some sleepless nights. I've been looking at some research about kind of the coffee industry and the coffee shop boom and what's happening in the industry, with the B2B industry, with the coffee machines. And I've got a concern here, because I think the market's moving in this direction, and we're staying here, and I think that our drinks need to do this, and I've come up with a solution. Now, this was a kid who's just come into this organisation, who's now starting and recognises that we're open as a shop to these kind of concepts, and his thoughts were wildly far future to anything else the other guys had come up with. We're talking sort of things that sort of 4 or 5 years that are going to need sort of millions of pounds of innovation. But the fact he had sat on his own time thinking about what we could do as a business moving forward meant so much to me as a line manager, because actually he got it so quickly, and he had to saw himself as having a vested interest into the way that he could make a change to the business. So I sent his ideas over to the global innovation team who work on our sort of technology R&D, and said, look, this guy who's one of my engineers has come up with some ideas, and they're pretty wild. All I want you to do is recognize them, and I want you to understand what he's thinking about. And the senior managers in the business all wrote back to my engineer and said, you know what, thank you for your thoughts, thank you for what you're thinking about, because you know what, a lot of them mirror to our thoughts. We can't talk about some of the stuff we're working on now, but just let it be known that you are challenging the way we think. And for me, that just meant so much, because when he wrote back to me and said, thank you for forwarding my email, I'm glad that somebody's listening to me, meant that actually that he had now been had a vested interest into the future of the business, and he got what we were trying to achieve. And I didn't ask him to do that. He did that on his own, and because he thought it was the right thing for him to do. And that's when I knew that the culture we were starting to embed was going to become self-sufficient.
Excellent, great story. So So, getting close to wrapping up, Ashley, could you briefly summarize what actually did this bring to you? What kind of key results did you see coming from your approach on driving change in your team?
So we've seen an increase in our productivity, the number of calls we do in a day. We've seen the increase come through the fact that we're not chasing work, we're actually controlling our demand, and therefore can be much more mindful about how we do things and when we do things. And that's come through the guys creating space. We've increased our overall reliability of our machine base, which in turn increases the customer's delight in what and how we do things, which then allows us to have a stronger USP, which allows us to win more business. And all of these are quantifiable through our results in some of our national teams. We've seen a reduction in our spares usage. I've seen an overall increase in the sales leads we've put in by over 150% year on year over the last couple of years. And when we optimize machines, I've seen a 33% increase on kind of the guys having successful conversations and driving change into our customer base. I've seen an overall engagement score increase through the teams, the staff, the associates, and at their level. And I've seen the continuation and improvement of our customers' engagement with us as a business.
Sounds pretty impressive. And do you see that your team is accelerating the speed of change and are ready to take more and more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and if I look at, I got an engineer by the name of Andy who at the start of this process was one of the people that we would probably looked at and said he's a risk. He's not the archetypal person we're looking for. Now he's leading so many kind of projects and change, and this is on top of his day-to-day roles, that actually the number of ideas that he keeps coming up with just means that we know that we've got enough good ideas to be working on for the next 12-15 months without even starting to think about new ones. And all of this is because he had an interest to kind of keep driving a change. And I spoke to him actually yesterday, and I thanked him for, he had some feedback from another line manager because of the way he'd done something. And I just said thank you, and he said I don't know what for, and I said, well, just thank you for being you. Thank you for driving the right change and for wanting to be part of this. And he said just don't change, because you're doing exactly what we wanted to do. And I think that he didn't even realize what he was achieving, and I think that's the most amazing thing.
Thank you, Ashley. So, getting close to wrap up now. So, looking back at what you've been sharing with us, I really believe that if we think this is about change management, getting buy-in, and people to get people on board, I think we're actually missing the point. It's all about creating an environment and a culture where everybody is eager to drive change, to see where the change is needed, and to collaborate and to make things happen together, and that they have a safe environment for that, and that you, by that way, actually have not only a successful project, but that you have a team who is ready to keep on innovating and changing for the future, which is quite imperative in our rapidly changing world at this moment. So thank you for that. Just before we go forward to Thomas to see if we have any questions, to the audience, if you would like to have an idea of where you are with momentum and the ability of your organization to drive continuous change and innovation, you can do via our website a free of charge scorecard, which will give you a picture of what are your strengths looking at momentum, your ability to drive change, and where are the areas to focus on to improve that ability to change and innovate. So we will give you the URL, the link to that scorecard. It is on our website. So Thomas, I will give it back to you and close up and see if we have any questions from the audience.
Yes, and thank you both, Ashley and Jan. I think because we only have actually about a minute left in the webinar, I'll ask Ashley just one question that kind of most questions were centered around, is actually more regarding the culture at Mars Drinks. So not only within the service division, but so when you came into the role as customer service director, how did you see the general culture within the organization? Was it receptive to change? Did you face any hurdles? Because at a lot of events, going through a lot of discussions with manufacturers, a lot of times they struggle because they don't see that a receptive ear from boards of directors or management teams to invest in service, whether it's on talent or on technology or other things. So how did you encounter that? Did you have to do a lot of convincing them, not only saying the advantages, but maybe talking more kind of monetary advantages, or how did you face that? Or were you just lucky into being in an organization that is already very customer centric?
So I think that there was a mix of everything in that, really. So I started off by saying, I aligned what we were trying to do with field service with all the organisation. And I was directly challenged by the senior management team to say, we need to get more from it, we need to spend less on it, and we need to look at how do we restructure and drive that behaviour. So if I could demonstrate an adherence to all their requirements through what I needed to achieve, then it was a win-win scenario. So I think there's lots of talk about trying to move service from being a cost centre to being a profit centre. And I think that what we try to look at was to say, well, how do we maximise this performance? And I said, and I would say to the management and say, look, we talk about sales as being the most important part of our organisation. However, if we didn't have a sales team for a year, well, you'd lose 1 year's worth of sales. But the majority of our business is actually client-based, and you'd say that actually, if we didn't have if we lost a service team within 12 months, that actually 80% of our business, if not all of it, would disappear overnight. So it's about structuring the conversation around kind of what's important, and at the same time, we as Mars Drinks, we're trying to understand how do we become more customer centric. How do we leverage our relationships? We knew it was broken in certain areas, and we leveraged areas where it was working to demonstrate how we could do more of it in other areas. And we knew that we had a strength with our engineers. It's about saying, and it's providing the so what. What are we going to do with that strength? And I think that once we could demonstrate what we could do with it, then we were given latitude to try things.
Yeah. And one last question, actually, in relating to your 3 S's, one of them being about strengthening. Actually, when you look at the relationship between the different departments, so between the service team and R&D or your innovation team or sales, do you feel that you've through this change have strengthened the relationships between at least between your team towards the other team? So if we look back at your example of your new engineer, the young guy who had some ideas that you forwarded to the innovation team, I mean, without going into details, but you feel like the result from the innovation team that you got was what you're aiming for, or would you feel that you'd get a stronger relationship back from them towards your service team?
In short, yes. We have numerous contact points around now. Our sales teams, our customer service teams, and the inbound team, and what people realise is actually that if they work together on things, that we get a better result. And that seems very intuitive. That should happen automatically. But actually, the engineers would say to the call centre, "I don't understand why you're sending me on these calls. They're not for us." And they said, "Well, we don't understand. How would we know what to send or not to send? We just talk to the customer." And they said, "Well, okay. What happens if we were to give you some upskilling or some direction to be able to ask the right kind of questions, or actually to solve some of these issues over the phone? That would free up our time and also allow you to solve that customer's need at the point of contact." And they took it upon themselves to come together and say, "It's all right if we talk about this." And it was just absolutely, yes, we can help do that and get the right people in a room to kind of create that. So we would continually challenge ourselves, and this is no way in a perfect nirvana. We have bumpy conversations on a day-to-day basis because we deal with customers and we deal with people, and this isn't kind of I say it's not a nirvana, but what we do know is that if we center around the customer and we talk about kind of what the possibilities could be, then we get people on board.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much, Ashley, for your time today and your insights, and Jan as well. It's been a pleasure of having you both this afternoon for this Copperberg webinar. So just a last note, of course, for the audience, we do have the 11th edition of the Aftermarket Business Platform coming up next month at the Hotel Atlantic Kempinski in Hamburg, so from the 18th to the 20th. The main theme of the event will be about, well, unleashing Service 4.0, so we're not talking only about technology. Actually, Jan will be hosting a panel discussion on creating an engaging service culture within the organization. We have great case studies from Caterpillar, ABB, SKF, Seco Tools, GE Healthcare, and many more organizations. Also, great thanks to our partners for this year, which you see there on the screen. If you want more information about the events, feel free to visit our website, aftermarketeurope.com. And if you are interested in doing the free Momentum scorecard, you have also the URL address there. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and we actually have our next Copperberg webinar on October 12th. We will have more information about that, but it'll be very exciting case study from Rolls-Royce about their digitization of their field service business. So again, thank you, Ashley and Jan, and I look forward to seeing you all again at a future webinar or Copperberg event. Thank you. Bye.
It was a pleasure, and many thanks, Thomas and Ashley. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.